Dear participants, welcome back to the people we have right now in the room and the participants who are attending the forum online. Welcome back to the plenary session, Ways Forward to Advancing Social Inclusion Through Active Participation. It is our honor and pleasure to welcome our closing keynote speaker, His Excellency Miguel Ángel Moratinos, the UN Under-Secretary General and High Representative for the United Nations Alliance of Civilizations. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Well, so thank you. Thank you very much. I'm addressing to all of you from New York. Unfortunately, I was not able to travel to Lisbon and to receive the traditional warm hospitality of Portuguese friends. But let me start by expressing my great gratitude, a special thanks to all the organizers of this timely and very opportune event, and particularly to my dear friend Faisal bin Muammar, and of course to the European Council of Religious Leaders. For me, it's a great honor, a great privilege to take part in this concluding remark. Unfortunately, I was not being able to really follow the discussion and the debate. I'm sure it has been extremely enriching, extremely enlightening. And what I try in my address is to share with you some thought about this new concept, this new item that is called social cohesion. And at the same time, trying to propose and to share with you some specific project and program that United Nations Alliance of Civilization is trying to develop in the recent years in order to reinvigorate and to reinforce social cohesion in our societies. So, my dear friends, let me first express my great, I would say, support and satisfaction because this so-called new concept, social cohesion, this new item is going gradually up in the international agenda. I think before certain years ago, there has been some, of course, reference to inclusive societies in different expression about social cohesion, but now, and the proof of this important event in Lisbon demonstrate the great attention that policymakers and the main, let's say, stakeholders are addressing and taking into consideration the importance to debate about social cohesion, demonstrate that it's an item that we should pay attention and develop how we could really achieve this goal. My friends, we are at 10 days to the historical and critical summit in Glasgow about climate change. But I don't know, to be frank with you, if we are 10 days ahead or 10 weeks ahead or 10 years ahead in order to achieve in our societies this very important goal that is social cohesion. It is true that goal 16 of our SDG mentioned that promote just, peaceful, and inclusive society. And even if a kind of reference to social cohesion, it has not received appropriate, unique chapter or unique goal that will concentrate our effort in order to achieve this social cohesion. Even the 12 target that develop goal 16 of this promote just and peaceful, inclusive societies refer in an indirect way to social cohesion, but not specifically as you have been doing in Lisbon during the last days. So, my friend, we have to go and try to develop what it means. when we want to really achieve social cohesion, what we are trying to achieve, how we are going to really get to this goal. And that is, I think, one of our main concerns. Even though in the UN, in the, let's say, international community, in the house of internationalism, of multilateralism, well, social cohesion is also on fashion. In the new proposal, Secretary General has addressed to the member state last September of a new common agenda. The first, let's say, block of new ideas is precisely this need for a new social contract. If you want to have a new social contract in our society, there is no other way, there are other means that really to move forward to achieve social cohesion. But the problem is, that's my second reflection, my second thought to share with you, how can we achieve that goal? How we are going to be able really to put some policies and some action in order to really get to this main goal, that is to really have inclusive societies. And unfortunately, I see, having a very rapid look to the two ways to act, there is one, unfortunately, that is taking some movement forward that from the beginning I will reject, and I think all of us we will reject, is that, well, let's create a uniform society. Let's have one unique identity. Let's have a racist society. And unfortunately, in certain populist leadership, or populist government, or populist political parties, that is the case. We are witnessing in Europe, and we are discussing in this seminar, in this conference, this high-level dialogue of social cohesion, what is going on in Europe. In Europe, my friend, we are confronting more and more with this kind of behavior, with this kind of attitude. Let's say we don't want others, we don't want diversity, we don't want multiculturalism, we want a racist society. And that is being taking place in France in the coming new future presidential election. It's happening in a lot of Eastern European countries. It's happening in my own country, Spain, when people say that indigenous are communist. And so I don't know how indigenous people that are trying to really recuperate their rights can take this statement. So that is one way, but I think we should really fight for that, but fight really, because it's a kind of appeasement or complaisance that, whereas freedom of expression, freedom of action, we can and we listen to this kind of discourse, this kind of political thinking. The second way forward, and I think it's the one we should really work for together, is the one who really put diversity as not as a threat, but as an enlightening and rich element. We are diverse. Human beings are diverse. Humanity is diverse. There are many cultures, many religions, many civilizations. And so why we are afraid of enhancing our society through social cohesion, accepting and making mechanisms in order to respect each other? And I think that it should be, our main goal to go ahead. How we are going to do so? I think we should try, third element of my thought, is to transcend the traditional approach when we try to really address these so-called, inverted commas, minorities, refugees, migrants. In fact, they are minorities because they come to a new country, they are not the majority, so we are treating them, unfortunately, as minorities. And the traditional discourse says, let's protect minorities. But I think time has come, as His Holiness Pope Francis has very magnificently exposed in several documents, that we have to transcend this concept of minority. Minority is a reduced concept, it's a limited concept. I think for us, in order to really achieve social cohesion, we have to go to this new concept of global citizenship that the Pope Francis and other scholars and analysts and politicians are defending, and myself, I'm defending. Pope Francis, when he visited Morocco in 2019, was sharing with King Mohammed VI this way that, well, it's not minority, the religion has not, we have really to give to every citizen as equal right the capacity to defend their faith and their belief. So I think this citizenship element is fundamental in order to give rights to everybody who are in a country, in a place. And I recommend the reading and the application and implementation of Pope Francis' Fratelli Tutti, the encyclic, where all these elements about refugee, migrant, and social cohesion has been reserved an important part of this important message of His Holiness the Pope. So the fourth element is this confusion that exists between secularism and spirituality, or laicism and spirituality. And so the difficulty that even we have thought that what was for God, what for Caesar was already agreed, accepted, but unfortunately we are confronting ourselves in mainly in Europe this new debate. Yes, spirituality is accepted, but please don't talk too much about religion. It's something that disturbs us. Don't put the citizen society in this difficult situation. And so I have a quote of, again, of Pope Francis when he addressed in the 5th anniversary of the relation between European Union and the Holy See, that I think should really recuperate and disseminate. The Pope Francis said, and I quote, "I dream of a Europe marked by a healthy secularism, where God and Caesar remain distinct but not opposed. A land open to transcendence, where believers are free to profess their faith in public and to put forward their own point of view." We need a healthy secularism and not a conflictual secularism. And I think that will benefit in achieving, this social cohesion. So, in order not to prolong my intervention, I will conclude with a specific project. United Nations Alliance of Civilization is working very strongly in certain areas and with certain cities in order to promote this cultural diversity and to reinforce, social cohesion. We have a very successful project in La Courneuve today. In the front page of Le Monde, La Courneuve is a city around Paris where 100 nationalities are living together. And we are trying to demonstrate that you can live together and reinforce even better the social cohesion of this city. This project, we are moving to Sevilla, to Madrid and Vallecas, to other capitals in the northern part of the southern part of Mediterranean. And in a meeting we had in Sevilla last 2 weeks ago, we promote this kind of cities of resilience where social inclusion is the most important thing. Of course, we are working hand by hand with our colleague, the Office of Prevention of Genocide, that are the main protagonists of the UN plan of hate speech, and you have been discussing hate speech, and we should, of course, try to eliminate and defeat the hate speech in all the discourses, and with the negative impact of social network. And I think hate speech is part of our concrete action in different projects and programs. We have been working with media literacy, how we can instruct the journalists and people involved in journalism in order that understand the language and the sensitivity of the language with migrants and refugees. We are working with the youth in an IOM, the International Organization of Migration, with programs about to disseminate through videos and short films this concept of living together and reinforce a social cohesion. So, my dear friend, that is what we should try to do, to go forward, not just to stand on the discourse of politically correct statement, but we have to implement policies that really fight against racism, fight against populism, fight against exclusion, and policies, on the contrary, we have to defend the ones who are putting diversity as element of richness and enlightenment for all of us. So thank you very much, and thank you for giving me the chance to share my thought with all of you.
Well, Brother Miguel, Your Excellency, thank you very much. Thank you really for joining us from wherever you are. I think you are in New York, and I know you have a busy schedule, but we are honored to have you with us, and we listen to your speech. It's like you are with us, thanks to the technology, allowing you to be with us with your heart and your brain and the wisdom you brought to us. So on behalf of all the participants, we are grateful to you. Thank you very much. Looking forward to meet you soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Baisa. Thank you.
And now, in this closing plenary, the rapporteurs of each working group will present the main conclusions, including the proposals of policy recommendations for each input paper. This will be an opportunity to hear some feedback and input on presentations from our distinguished speakers, but also to underline some of the key aspects relevant to the discussion we had on fostering social inclusion and enhancing participation of refugees and migrants in host societies. It is my pleasure now to invite Professor Mohammed Abu-Nimer, the moderator, and our distinguished speakers who join us. Thank you.
No, we'll start with number one. They are still in the audience. I'm going to call them. Good afternoon to everyone. My name is Mohammed Abu-Nimer. Welcome, everyone. We are in our last stretch of this meeting, and happy to try and moderate this. I welcome our honorable speakers, Ms. Sónia Pereira, High Commissioner for Migration in Portugal. Thank you for joining us. Sheikh Ibrahim Mugra, Assistant Secretary General of Muslim Council of Great Britain, and Ms. Alice Shizabanakova from ODIHR Migration Freedom Movement Advisor. She will be joining us virtually, I think, later on. Without further ado, we listen to the High Representative of the United Nations Undersecretary for Alliance of Civilization with I think, a proper closing remarks. We're going to shift gear and listen to the concrete outcomes that came out from the 4 tracks. And later on, we will receive some comments and some observations from our panelists here. The main framing here is we don't have to come to a consensus or conclusion. The recommendation will be presented for everyone to think about them and take them home as well. And we also, as KAICIID, will take them home with us, and we will adjust our briefing policy paper as you all receive them based on the light of those recommendations as well. So please treat this as another working session for us, where we look at the concrete general recommendation as well for you, or came from you to the continuation. That will be followed with 15 minutes comments by our colleague from the European program on the way forward. I am hoping to have few minutes for the floor comments after the presentation. So I'm not going to comment on any of the presentation. Again, thank you for your patience with us. I'm going to call you group number 1, and you'll have 3 minutes to quickly share your product. Group number 1? Yes, please. And you can use the podium, and we will do... we can't see you, so yeah. Please, group number 2 to be ready after that. Thank you.
Hello, I am Farhat Shamu. I'm the rapporteur for the participation of the migrant and refugee in the volunteering with our working group. Our challenge is the issue of inclusion in the society. We feel that volunteerism, like cohesion, is two-way street between the host community and the newcomers. However, there is lack of a spirit for the volunteerism in many of our societies, as well as a lot of unrecognized volunteerism by migrants and refugees. For migrants and refugees, we require volunteerism to have a set of purpose in order to best take advantage of the skills of newcomers in the society. Our first recommendation is directed at the local politicians and policymakers to acknowledge existing accreditation of the migrants and refugees and implement programs for newcomers to be placed in organizations and companies for volunteering and internship based on their skills. This work has to be ideally remunerated, even slight so, recognized and count as a credit toward their status in the country. Our second recommendation is to include cultural, faith-based organizations, faith leaders within the structure of the government and local government consultation and dialogue on the local needs of migrant and local communities that can be responded through the volunteering and internships. The second part of this recommendation can be involve cultural faith-based organization and faith leader in the promotion and recruitment to the volunteering and the identification of the social and other needs that requires volunteers within the community. Then, ensure someone is appointed by the authority to link local volunteers and faith bodies in the identifying volunteering needs and support. Ensure and encourage interfaith and intercultural engagement through volunteering. And the last part of this recommendation is the ensuring sensitization of volunteers and voluntary bodies and statutory agencies to meet the cultural and religious need of migrants through the training and dialogue. Our last recommendation, and the third one I can say, is to set up governmental programs that offer grants to civil society and public institutions to provide internship and volunteering opportunity of migrants and for refugees and asylum seekers. That program should be included cultural training for both hosting institution and the volunteers. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Thank you for two things, sticking to the time and also providing us with concrete three specific recommendations. Our task in the audience is to think about major gaps or anything else you can comment on those three. I hope we'll have a chance to do so because I know only one group did that. Group number 2, please. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. My name is Adam Elsud. I'm a project manager of the Voicify project. I will be reporting on track 2. That's related to the political participation of... yeah? Good? Okay. So the better and more refugees and migrants can meaningfully and effectively influence policymaking processes, the more the outcomes of these processes will be sustainable, trustworthy, engaging. It's like if I want or if I need an apple and you are offering me a chair, that will never work. So the more we know about the needs of the people that are affected by the policies, the more these policies would be sustainable. But also, it's about sharing responsibility between host communities, policymakers, and refugee and migrant-led organizations and communities in general. So proper mechanisms and tools need to be developed to ensure migrants and refugees can participate fully in their new societies. Therefore, the first recommendation is for legislators to create infrastructures of inclusion of migrants and refugees at local, regional, national, and European levels in political and policymaking processes. This should be done in line of the Council of Europe Convention of 1992 on the participation of foreigners in public life on the local level. So inclusion advisory committees or consultative bodies need to be composed of representatives of migrant and refugee-led organizations and set up at the local level and be consulted not only on policies that are related to issues of inclusion and migration, but to different aspects of the public local life. This brings us to our working group's second recommendation, namely that capacity building is an essential part for political or component for political participation. And with capacity building, we mean the development of different stakeholders that are involved in this process. That entails making information available in different languages, in different formats, the basic principles related to the political systems, the practices, the mechanisms, but also a capacity building for the policymakers themselves to understand the relevance and importance of the political participation of refugees and migrants. Our working group's final policy recommendation is to map out relevant migrant and refugee-led organizations across Europe. In line with the same convention that was mentioned earlier, we need to work on a lively and continuously updated database or databases that would facilitate the political participation and visibility of these self-led organizations. This should be done through the representative local consultative bodies formed by migrants and refugees or migrant and refugee-led organizations and supported by municipalities. Then the national governments would collect the info from the local level and transmit or transfer that to the European Commission, who would be creating and updating these databases on a regular basis. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for those three concrete as well. We'll move to group number 3.
Thank you. So, oh, so who's group number 3? Ah, okay, no.
That way they can prepare the material.
Thank you so much. I'm going to come with recommendation on ensuring access to formal education for refugees and immigrants. And I would like to start with a quote. As Malcolm X said, education is the passport to the future. For tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for today. Therefore, we recommend that all refugee children have access to education as their legal right, without the need for documentation. We have seen that refugee children don't have access to education in countries such as Greece and the UK. Besides having access to education, refugee children and their parents should have access to have their mental health needs attended to. Imagine being in a classroom when the only thoughts you have in your head is war, death, and fear. How can you prepare for your future? Now, let's talk about the teachers. We can all agree that teaching is the most important job in the world. Because without education, would we be sitting here today? Each teacher has the opportunity to shape and impact tens of thousands of young lives over the course of their career. But imagine a teacher that for the first time receives refugee children in her classroom. How can that teacher include them in the classroom in a way that they feel that they are seen and heard and respected, that their culture and religious background is respected? We recommend that intercultural education should be obligatory, not only for the teachers, but the entire school staff, to help the employers at the schools to seize the opportunity that diversity offers and learn how to teach and interact in a global, diverse, and challenging world. Therefore, in partnership with CIRIS and Migrant Integration Policy Index and other research networks and institutions, European Policy Dialogue Forum wants to participate in the assessment of monitoring of both formal national education systems and interreligious organization in the integration of the need of immigrants and refugees. The aim behind these recommendations is for schools to give a human value for every student. In the larger sense, to have a peaceful social inclusion. I would like to end this speech with a quote. One child, one teacher, one book, one pen can change the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the quote as well. I think number 4, anxious number 4, we can come. I'm glad you made it here.
I couldn't wait.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm here to present track number 4, Combating Hate Speech Against Refugees and Migrants Through Interreligious and Intercultural Dialogue. At first, I would like to frame the problem. So hate speech is an extreme representation of the challenges and problems within our societies today. Addressing hate speech will not simply be about removing online posts of fear and discrimination, but promoting education, mindfulness, and listening, and transformation. A united policy and understanding among stakeholders, including faith-based actors, is vital to effectively addressing hate speech. Therefore, our first recommendation is promoting a harmonious coexistence. for local authorities to create a concrete plan to promote hope speech and social empathy. We need a little bit more roomy and less hate. By involving FBOs, media professionals, educators, and educational institutions through capacity building. Our second recommendation would be common action through multi-faith approach. For religious educational institutions to have a multi-faith based on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging approach on training and equipping faith leaders with tools that will help them to create an alternative discourse. Our final recommendation is countering hate speech based on religious text. So for faith-based organizations to become content creators and create educational content based on religious text, designed to raise awareness and promote inclusiveness, diversity, belonging, spirituality, and mindfulness to counter hate speech. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for all the groups for, again, working hard on coming up with those concrete, tangible, as well as in many ways addressing the faith group, the government, and the civil society. Hold on your comments. We'll come back hopefully to them. The floor is yours to give us your reflection, and thank you for hosting us in Lisbon. And you just speak to Mike.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, dear moderator, for giving me the floor. During the last 2 days, we've had the opportunity of listening, discussing, and learning with these very different voices and perspectives, as well as ideas. For these and also for the choice of themes that have been addressed at this forum, I would like, in the name and on behalf of Portuguese authorities, to congratulate you and thank you. And I would also like to highlight the importance and symbolism of discussing these issues in Portugal. Our country has been fully committed to the promotion of human rights, social inclusion, as well as orderly, safe, and regular migration. So with the kind acceptance of our moderator, I will comment also based on the Portuguese experience and taking this opportunity also to share with you some of the things that we've been doing. Global mobility enhances the widening of intercultural and interreligious dialogue. Portugal has been successfully addressing diversity as one of the key elements of contemporary societies. The country has demonstrated a peaceful coexistence and an atmosphere of intercultural and interreligious dialogue. As an example, this year, the law on religious freedom celebrated 20 years, 2 decades in which freedom of conscience, religion, and worship is guaranteed to all. And this is also complemented by a very strong promotion of interreligious dialogue. And we consider faith leaders as well as faith-based organizations as important partners. And I take this opportunity also to mention that we have had the opportunity of experiencing faith-based organizations and communities being very committed and important partners, for example, in the reception and integration of refugees. Throughout these productive forum days, it has become clear that social inclusion will only succeed if some conditions stimulate and enable also active participation of all citizens towards this common goal. However, and because we are talking about potential vulnerable groups, we must not forget that an intersectional approach is also necessary when addressing refugees, migrants, and minorities, and also paying special attention to the specific situation of women and children. In Portugal, the High Commission for Migration works towards the promotion of human rights amongst vulnerable groups. And our mission is to collaborate on determining, executing, and assessing public policies concerning migration, the integration of migrants and ethnic groups, and on managing and also valuing the diversity between cultures, ethnic groups, and religions. So as the High Commissioner for Migration, allow me to briefly share some initiatives that have been developed by our public institute to support the integration and inclusion and also to promote diversity. And this, I think, goes also in line with some of the issues that have been raised here before by the speakers before and related to the discussions that have been held in the different tracks in the forum. So regarding intercultural education, there is a network of schools that promote intercultural education, and this is a very good example also of a partnership that has been constituted between the High Commissioner for Migration, also the Ministry of Education, and the Aga Khan Foundation. And it has involved throughout every generation around 50 schools spread all over the country. Considering intercultural education as an integral part of citizenship education, this network aims to support schools in their path to transform their practices, valuing diversity as a source of learning and development. And this has been one of the issues raised before. It's worth mentioning also that in Portugal, all children are entitled to education regardless of their status. In 2020, the network's online platform was launched. Monthly online events aimed at the network team members in schools have been taking place. Events open to all members of the educational communities of member schools were held, in total of 10 online events and reaching around 300 professionals. Portugal has been recognized for its integration policies based on the whole of society and whole of government, including all levels of government approach. And this reflects the complexity of integration in society and has been part of different national plans put in place on this topic. The actions and initiatives I mentioned are just a few examples of the application of public policies designed to promote the integration and inclusion of all countries. And this regard, it is also worth mentioning that Portugal was one of the first countries to adopt a national plan for the implementation of the United Nations Global Compact for Migration, as was indeed mentioned yesterday by the Secretary of State. And this has strengthened our compromise with migrants' integration and also social inclusion. This plan is currently in force and contemplates nearly 100 measures that that intend to improve migrants' overall integration and inclusion in Portuguese society. It includes access to Portuguese language learning, also improve access to schooling for children and young people, vocational training for adults, and also stimulating integration and civic participation of migrants. The High Commission for Migration also develops a very important line of work related to supporting migrant associations and also encouraging migrant entrepreneurship. And we have a department that is dedicated to supporting migrant associations and also civic participation, and we see this as a very important reflex of our approach of migration as a whole of society and the recognition that migrants associations are an important partner in this process. To conclude, we know that there is no standard formula. Policies and actions must be tailored to the needs and reality of each country, city, and territory. We firmly believe that social inclusion of all requires the stimulation and creation of conditions for migrants to exercise their civic participation actively. To achieve so, we must consolidate their societies of solidarity, cooperation, and mutual respect that recognize and celebrate the dignity of every human being and actively engage in the promotion of social inclusion. And also taking into account the recognition of the different trajectories, backgrounds, and skills, as we also heard mentioning before. We are actively engaged in this. process, and we've been struggling a little bit with it as well. And so very soon we are hosting, in collaboration with ICMPD, a working webinar that is specifically dedicated to the process of recognition of skills for refugees that arrive in our host countries, and we expect to have a diversity of experiences across Europe as well to help us in improving our work in this domain. Finally, let me address a final word to KAICIID, to the European Policy Dialogue Forum, to the Network for Dialogue, and the European Council for religious leaders. Please consider the High Commission for Migration as a close partner, a mutual friend, and an entity that is eager to work together to achieve these common goals. Just as a final note, we have the challenge of continue to work towards the achievement of the goals that are set out in meetings such as this, and to the promotion of human rights globally. When, as we heard mentioning by our keynote speaker, when different religions are welcomed in a healthy secularism, as we heard. Thank you all for your participation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Pereira, for your comments, in particular, your open invitation to consider the High Commissioner as a partner. We certainly register that, and we look forward for further cooperation. I think you highlighted 4 points at least common to the various recommendations made here. The Aga Khan partnership you have on intercultural education. All children are entitled for a free education, as you mentioned, as well as the national plan with 100 different measures, and also the support for migrant association. These are all 4 recommendations came from the different groups. Just a point for you, maybe if we have time later on, you didn't comment as much on the religion and faith, your work with religion and faith group specifically. Maybe at the end, if we have time, we'd love to hear from you. But allow me now to move to Sheikh Ibrahim Mugra, who's also Religion for Peace UK, and also the previous title that we have mentioned. Sheikh Ibrahim, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of God, the Beneficent, the Merciful. I just want to begin by congratulating all the groups for the amazing policy recommendations that you've made. I am delighted that you've set your sight very high. I don't want to dampen your spirits. I hope that this will become a reality. But we have to be realistic, and excuse me if I pick holes in some of the recommendations as I see them, and I'll be very happy to be corrected once the floor is open to all of you. So we begin with the volunteering group. I think it's a great shame that volunteering is not as much recognized as it should be, particularly volunteerism that is offered by migrant and refugee communities themselves. I think long-standing settled communities would do well to promote this and to partner with new communities in order to enhance further volunteerism. It was said in one of the groups that I participated, Group 1, that this is a two-way street. And that's the best way to get the best results out of volunteerism. Of course, many new communities that come to live with us, settled communities, have been volunteering as part and parcel of their life. It's not something that they have a separate box for, that's just what they do. And that needs to be appreciated and recognized. So on the policy recommendations, I think it's important that governments acknowledge the existence of volunteering, and training is extremely important. And I like the idea of internships where people are paid to learn and gain experience of how to offer their volunteering time. I think that is a realistic target, and I hope that that will materialize. I also like your second recommendation where faith leaders and institutions should be made involved by local authorities when it comes to planning strategies and projects for the inclusion of newcomers, minority communities, migrants and refugees in what affects their day-to-day lives. I think that also is realistic, and I hope it will be achieved across Europe. The idea of appointing an officer is very important. In my experience, certainly where I live in Leicester, many times the local authority will make decisions about a particular segment of our city, and it's not appropriate, it's not fit for purpose. And many times it has to be redone. So they would do well to appoint someone who will be the liaison officer directly in contact with the communities on the ground to get a feel of the pulse of the communities they wish to serve. I think grants for internships should be made available to enhance intercultural awareness training. It's very, very critical that that money is made available because volunteers give their time and they should not also be out of pocket at the same time. With regards to political participation, my understanding is, and I'm speaking for the United Kingdom, even long-standing minority communities struggle to get a foot in onto the political ladder. And you can imagine how much more difficult it would be for newcomers. Having said that, you'll be delighted to know we have with us Rahman Chishti, MP, who's from a minority community. He's made it into parliament along with many other minority groups, but it has taken such a very long time. And I hope that all our countries will open their doors to political participation of migrant and refugee communities to help them be fully integrated citizens and members of our societies. Capacity building is essential for migrant and refugee communities to learn about our political systems, how we operate. Many may be coming from backgrounds where their countries were dictatorships and have no experience of how democracy works. So we need to empower them to understand our political systems and be party to government. I think it's very important to have policy that requires local government to identify and have a database of all the migrant and refugee-led voluntary organizations so that they know precisely who needs support, both financial and logistical. With regards to access to education, I want to make a correction. I can't speak about Greece, but certainly the United Kingdom offers full education to every migrant and refugee child. No one is denied or deprived of an education. I can vouch for that, and I have a beautiful example to share with you of a young boy, Adnan, from Syria, who came to the United Kingdom 3 years ago, to Leicester. He joined Crown Hills Community College, which is just down the road from where I live. He had zero English. He could not speak any English. This June, 3 years later, he passed his GCSE, General Certificate of Secondary Education examinations with 9 A-star grades. 9 A-star grades. My heart tells me he should go one day back to his country and help rebuild his beautiful country that has been devastated by war. My mind tells me we could do with him in the UK and make the most of it. And I will quickly move on to commenting on hate speech. Hate speech is devastating, and it needs to be combated, definitely, most definitely, whether it's in the media, whether it's from our politicians, whether it's from our faith leaders. My mentor and teacher, Allama Muhammad Shahid Raza, said to me once, he said, from the pulpit, if you cannot say anything good about others, then say nothing about them. If you're going to talk about others, say something good. Otherwise, keep your silence. Because hate that is preached from the pulpit can be extremely dangerous, just as it is preached from other avenues. I believe common action should be called for. It's a very important policy recommendation, and religious text clearly, whether it's an exclusivist approach or inclusivist approach, I think should never be used to promote hatred. If the chair will allow me, I just want to make two personal observations, which are a burning issue for me personally. I have been troubled over this for a long time, where we have a selective approach to which migrants and refugees are allowed into our countries. We've been very, very selfish in allowing those who have qualifications, who have certain skills, doctors, accountants, lawyers, engineers, and others. And I just find it so inhumane. How can we choose between two families who are suffering in the same way, and we allow the ones that are educated and have a qualification into our countries, while those who are not, who are poor and not very well educated, remain in their dire situation? Something has to change, something has to give, whether it's a quota system, through sponsorship. Obviously, those families that are well-to-do, they will get their loved ones over out of danger. But what about those who are left behind? Those farmers who maybe don't have that education. But let's look forward. That farmer will come over with his or her family, like Adnan, for example. They will do well. They will excel, and hopefully not just enrich our own countries, but go back to their home countries. The dispersal policy is also very troubling. In the UK, for example, when migrants and refugees come, they are dispersed far and wide throughout the country to spread the cost between the local authorities. But how can you drop a family, a Syrian family, Somali family, Afghan family, in the middle of a quintessential English village where there is nobody like them, there's no familiarity? So these are issues, I think, that need to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Sheikh Ibrahim, for your positive endorsement of all the recommendation and for your correction, as well as for the suggestion to qualify on the issue of the education. At least Portugal and UK already offering that, so maybe there should be qualification in the framing of that recommendation, but also for your call to recognize the informal forms of voluntarism that already has been done that need to be acknowledged. Thank you again. I see that Alice from the ODIHR with us, our partner. Welcome, and the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this distinguished panel. It's a great honor and also a great pleasure to hear all these very practical recommendations and the scope of the discussion that you've been having in the past days. And I'm glad to comment a little bit. Just to introduce myself, I'd like to say a few words about the Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights, which is the principal institution of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, or OSCE. And what we do is we assist participating states, and there are 57 of them, in fulfilling their obligations to promote and protect human rights and fundamental freedoms that are consistent with their commitments that they've made, especially under the human dimension of security cooperation. And specifically, our Migration and Freedom of Movement program here in Warsaw provides a range of awareness raising and capacity building activities that are aimed at different stakeholders across the OSCE region. And we try to offer recommendations and promote good practices, particularly focusing on stakeholders who have the power to actively shape policies and political debate on migration. And so with that power, we often also organize training for various state officials. We bring together civil society and national representatives. So in that respect, these recommendations that I've heard today are also very, very useful for our own work. And I'd like to comment on them one by one. just very briefly, sort of spontaneously, as I've been listening to them, I think I really appreciated the comment about the lot of unrecognized voluntarism among refugees. And I'd just like to add that what I've seen also in my own research on the topic is that refugees are very often expected to be grateful and to be very, ready to offer their time without any hesitation and any remuneration. And I think that the response with the suggestion to put more emphasis on paid internships, even though they may not be greatly paid, but just some kind of recognition, is a very good one. And I think it's an excellent way to create space for meaningful encounters. And the more meaningful, they are meaningful because if refugees or migrants work on common projects with representatives of the host society, this gives a much more, I think, effect in terms of breaking stereotypes than some kind of a campaign trying to project positive stories about migrants and refugees. So doing things together is really one of the best ways to actually break stereotypes. I would even suggest to broaden the recommendation, not only internships with local civil society organizations, but also with public institutions, with the media, with political parties, to really sort of be ambitious and have a wide scope of trying to bring refugees and migrants into different institutions and have these meaningful encounters facilitated through those programs. On the issue of migrant participation in political life and democratic processes, I'd just like to insert, and I'm sure you've had this discussion, one sort of caveat, and that is that we should be wary of only consulting migrants and refugees on migrant-related issues. We talk a lot about this, about integration as a whole of society matter and a whole of community approach. And for that, I think it's really important to avoid this sort of pigeonholing and the assumption that migrants and refugees only can have something to say on issues related to migration or situation of refugees. Because we shouldn't forget that being refugee is and should be really a temporary situation. It's not a professional identity. So people have studied, they've been professionals in different areas of life, and they may have something to say on other matters as well, and they are part of the community and should be treated as such. So they could have their say on various matters and be part of those debates and decision-making processes. On the issue of education and access to education, I think obviously there's no doubt that children need to have access to education, and I would just like to go a little bit further and stress that even when they have access to formal education, what we've seen during the COVID pandemic is very clear that even then, if they don't have appropriate equipment, for example, such as computers at home or space at home to actually participate in these remote education when they can't go to school, I think their access is effectively limited. So we have to go beyond that and make sure that together with other marginalized groups, refugee and migrant children have access to education in all its different forms. So to equip them with the right the computers and other sort of ICT tools that they are used in education, and to be really cautious about the long-term effects of having children basically locked down at home, not being able to participate in-person education, the effects on their language skills and on their sort of mental health well-being. So I think there's growing interest in also research on this topic, and that should be certainly supported and taken on board when we advocate for access of migrant children, refugee and migrant children to education. And lastly, the track on combating hate speech. Here, I think it's absolutely essential to recognize that public narrative basically sets the boundaries for politically acceptable policy choices. And so if the only story about migration is the one of threats, and increasingly in this part of Europe, in Poland, we've heard the talk of migration being talked about as a hybrid threat, when migrants are being instrumentalized in geopolitical standoffs between countries, or when we talk about migration in terms of chaos and invasion, then obviously the only solutions that will be on the table are those of security, fences, walls, and exclusion. And I think for that reason, really, we have to counter xenophobic and hate speech as really a common interest, as a shared responsibility by those who produce this language, but also by the object, so to say. So to empower migrants and refugees to be part of this discourse in a positive and constructive way. And I think the other groups, the first three tracks, are trying to do exactly that. So it's very nice to see this sort of very holistic approach that you've taken. I would just like to say that also we need to be aware of the tension between freedom of expression and efforts to combat hate speech. Because what we don't want to do is we don't want to limit free speech and close off the spaces for important conversations, including those in which hate-filled statements can be challenged in a robust debate and counter-narratives can be presented. And I think from our own sort of work and research, what we see that the counter-narratives, if they're built around sort of breaking myths and educating people about the facts, they may not be as effective because that makes often people feel stupid or uninformed. It can even produce anger among the audiences. They should rather be really built on sort of shared, positive, and unifying values. And
Thank
I think
you.
here also faith-based organizations have a really important role to play to find those unifying values and put them in the center of those narratives. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for at least highlighting 3 points. The one regarding broadening the voluntarism issue for refugees to wider institution, and not only to specific one, as well to policy institution. And also consultation with refugees should not be pigeonholing them to only one issue, as we did sometimes with the gender issue. And finally, I think the issue of the tension between freedom of expression and hate speech is something I'm sure the group struggled with and they spoke about. So thank you for your input. Thank you for everyone. We actually have about 8 minutes with us, according to my time. So with your permission, if I can open it to the comments to what you have heard from our 3 speakers, comments on what you have heard from the other 3 groups who presented and you were not part of it. And finally, comments, as this is the final session for you together as a network, and tomorrow we have another group coming with you to join you in another one day discussion. So you have 3 areas to comment. Please make your intervention less than 30 seconds. And I will make sure that it is 30 seconds. So be precise. Go ahead.
Okay. Just on the hate speech, on recommendations from the reporter from hate speech, combating hate speech, I think hate speech, as was told by Sheikh Ibrahim, it is extremely dangerous, and it creates a precondition for hate crime. So it is really dangerous. It is not just, of course, it is important raising awareness and all of this. I think recording and making complaints and also taking it even to the court and to prosecute the perpetrators, also it is the important point also we should add to this 3 important points, that recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. Perfect. 29 seconds. Excellent. That's a good example. And the criminalization is a huge issue, and you know that there is some discussion about it later on. I can't see people, so because of the lights. as I said, also comments on anything. Go ahead, please.
Hello, my name is Anna Zobnina, European Network of Migrant Women. I want to thank the organizers, all the participants, and my one comment to all the working groups and the recommendations. I think you really need to pay specific attention to migrant and refugee women and girls. This has been, I think, a significant weakness in the discussions, and I would really encourage to be more explicit on the very specific needs, situations, and voices of migrant women and girls. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other comment? Any question? Yes, please.
Actually, I have a question for Sheikh Ibrahim. It seems like we live in an era where religion is a very big problem, or people look at it as a big problem in our everyday lives, and it is being demonized. And it seems like a particular religion, especially Islam, is being demonized. Do you think that other faith-based religious leaders should get up in solidarity to talk about this issue together, or is this a challenge only for the Muslim community? Thank you.
Thank you. Just, if you don't mind, we'll collect all, and then I'll give you a chance. Thank you. Remember, this is your chance to comment on the other groups and interact. You don't have to be shy about commenting on that. Yes, we have two. Yes, please. Anila. Noor Anila, yes.
Thank you. First of all, thank you so much. I really want to comment on the recommendation to make sure we build on. We don't start from this scratch, but how we can build on, because recommendation is really good, and how we can move forward for this all a policy brief. And as I already being a representative of refugees and migrants, would like to be work with you as a partner. So we'd like to see how we can collaborate and to see how we can make an ecosystem so we can build on. Thank you.
Thank you. So it's a call really for how we can move this forward, right? Through partnership and expressing your willingness to be part of this. Thank you. Yes, Amina.
Thank you. I'm Amina from the UK. Currently I'm in deep reflection because of what's going on in the UK. Very disheartened and heartbroken by the killing of our significant MP. Now that a man has been arrested by the police following the killing of the MP, Sir David Amis, that been named Ali as a young Somali. And since then, in the last few days that I've been here, I've been receiving all sorts of messages of how am I feeling, what's the reaction of the Somali community. And one thing I do not understand is that this young man is British, first and foremost. So why is that not being mentioned, and why is the dimension of the Somali and Muslim, because under the terrorism also section, and this happens to be the case every single time when something happens, there's always that negative connotation that's attached to first and foremost the faith, and secondly, migration, migrant, and refugees. And of course, as a refugee myself, this is something deeply concerning. But when Mo Farah, who happens to be of a Somali origin, nobody says Somali, we are championing that he is a British young man. So on the positive, when it's positive, it's being promoted under how wonderful, you know, that young person under the title of Britishness. And when it's negative, it's connecting to the faith and the country of origin, its roots.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And that's really linked to preparing the ground for hate speech as well. Yes, please. And this will be our last comment, and then we'll move to responses.
Last and short, Milica Pešić, Media Diversity Institute. I'm so glad I'm talking after this lady, because somehow we've been avoiding talking about media, particularly journalism, and then social media, and somehow we missed to mention it in any of the recommendations, the importance of the role media should play as public good in public interest. So I hope tomorrow we'll address that. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. That's a very important point also for our team to remember that none of the 4 sets mention media, but I know from our policy brief they are on that. Thank you, ma'am, for this important comment. Well, thank you all for your comments. I think due to time, I'm going to turn to you, Ms. Pereira, to respond to any of the comments and also to my maybe initial requests.
Yeah, thank you. I'll try to be brief and just to address your comment earlier. We do have an interreligious dialogue working group where the High Commission is the facilitator of the group. It exists since 2015 and involves more or less 13 of the largest faith based groups here in Portugal. This group convenes once a month. They discuss their issues, ideas. They also develop joint initiatives. And there is an annual event that the working group organizes together. It takes place on the National Day on Religious Freedom and Interreligious Dialogue on the 22nd of June. And this has been approved unanimously by the Portuguese Parliament in 2019, and it's an important day where some of these issues take the public space, and the working group on interreligious dialogue is very important. And they also promote each year a calendar of time with the different faiths joined together in a same calendar and with their respective religious festivities, and they also organize youth meetings. And it's an active working group where these different faiths come together. Overall, I think, and I take the point mentioned by the last panelist, that we need to think of migrants and refugees as members of our societies and not as just members of a particular niche in our societies, and involve them generally. And we have tried to do this to mainstream diversity, to include them in different forums and not just to discuss what affects them directly, what is related to migration and integration policy, which is important, but really just taps on that bit of their identity, as was mentioned here before, and they accumulate multiple identities as residents of a particular country. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Sheikh Ibrahim, you have a minute to respond only.
Thank you, Chair. Religion is demonized, particularly when the religion is Islam. That's a given. But other religions also have not been spared in the past. It's very important for us to stand up for each other as religious leaders. And I've seen some wonderful, wonderful examples of that right across Europe. I think there is solidarity between religious leaders, and we shall hear more about this, I'm sure, tomorrow. When it comes to crime and the reporting on criminality or terrorism, it's a fact that when the perpetrator is Muslim, the Islam component is highlighted very, very quickly. Other lone attacks have been given the benefit of doubt to say perhaps it's a mental health issue, and they wait for the verdict. Some years ago, there was an incident. We had some riots in London and in Birmingham. A group of youngsters deliberately ran over a group of Asian men. One of them sadly lost his life. And the father, who was totally distraught when he was interviewed, he said, "My religion, Islam, teaches me not to take revenge and to forgive. Please, everyone who is gathered here to make trouble, go home. Do you want your parents to lose you also? I've lost a son. I don't want your parents to lose you. So I forgive you, whoever did this to my son. That's what my religion teaches me." The next morning, the newspapers reported him as Asian man forgives killers of his son.
Thank you.
I guarantee you, if he had said, I want revenge, the newspapers would have said, Muslim father demands revenge.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Alice, we come to you as the last commentator. You have a minute. I hope you heard what the input was here. Go ahead.
Yes, I did. Thank you. I think just building up on the last comment, there's a lot of unconscious bias associated with the notions of Muslim, migrant, and other terms. And I think here the role of education and actually really tackling these unconscious biases that always come to the fore when there are these reports on the positive side or on the negative side, and they really confirm what we expect to hear. So I think whereas there's a lot of work being done on, let's say, gender implicit bias, there should be more really sort of in-depth work on these notions as well, and that could be done also in the education system from the very, very early stage, so that children don't build these negative connotations, but they build diversity of connotations.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Basically, we started with education, and maybe that's the prevention advice. Usually, we go back to early childhood education as a form of prevention of all of this. So thank you all. Please give yourself and also our speaker clap of thank you. And we invite our MC to bring the next session. Thank you.
Yeah, please join me once again in thanking Professor Abu-Nimer for his excellent moderation and the rapporteurs who gave us the chance to hear about the important work that was done during the past 2 days in the working groups and resulted in such inspiring and relevant recommendations. We're also delighted about the comments and contributions of our speakers in this session. So thank you once again. Right now, before we close the second and last day of the third European Policy Dialogue Forum on Refugees and Migrants, I would like to invite Isabel da Silva from the NGO Meru Porto, Alexandra Juric Milovanovic, Network for Dialogue Coordinator from KAICIID, and Johannes Langer, Senior Program Manager at KAICIID. Isabel will give her short address in Portuguese, and you can follow her in English through the Interprefy app. So, Isabel, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. If you allow me, I will speak to you in Portuguese. I believe it wouldn't be right to finish this forum without giving you the chance to prove that Portuguese is really beautiful, and even more so, my pronunciation from the north. É com alegria e gratidão que me encontro hoje aqui convosco e que partilho algumas palavras nesta sessão de encerramento em representação da organização portuguesa Miru Abrir Caminho, membro da Network for Dialogue, promovida pelo KAICIID. Juntou-nos em Lisboa o tema Include, Engage, Empower. Em português, incluir, envolver, empoderar. Nestes 3 verbos cabe uma infinidade de caminhos. Não há uma receita única e pronta. Talvez essa seja a primeira nota que a humilde experiência da Miru pode trazer a este debate. O acolhimento integral e sustentável de pessoas refugiadas e migrantes não combina com uma receita única e rapidamente replicável que possa responder a estatísticas. Se olharmos para os resultados do Programa de Acolhimento de Famílias Refugiadas em Portugal, ao abrigo de mecanismos de recolocação e reinstalação, é fácil percebermos que, apesar de muitos e meritosos passos dados, há ainda muito caminho por fazer para incluir, envolver e empoderar. Como nos dizia ontem o Chief Rabbi Michael Schudrick, há sempre algo mais a fazer. Por isso, e permita-me a Senhora Alta Comissária, olhemos então para possíveis caminhos a seguir no contexto português. Precisamos, por exemplo, de começar a repensar o modelo atual de bolsas mensais fixas, que, pelo que testemunhamos no terreno, pode ser prejudicial no empoderamento das famílias se não for conciliado com a integração no mercado de trabalho e com a educação para a gestão orçamental no contexto português. Precisamos de uma estratégia articulada que resolva o desafio real do acesso à habitação a preço justo, que permita que estas famílias possam estabelecer-se nos lugares onde durante 18 meses já recomeçaram as suas vidas. É urgente capacitar, orientar e avaliar as inúmeras instituições portuguesas que, sem experiência na área, estão, num ímpeto de solidariedade, a acolher famílias refugiadas em Portugal. É preciso também tornarmos verdadeiramente acessíveis os documentos que estas pessoas assinam e as informações de que dispõem. Recuemos a março de 2020. Quanto tempo demoramos em Portugal a disponibilizar informações traduzidas relativas à Covid-19 para pessoas migrantes e refugiadas? E é preciso ouvir verdadeiramente estas famílias. Não podemos avaliar o seu acolhimento apenas através da perspectiva das instituições que as acolheram. A avaliação tem que ser feita pelas próprias pessoas, com mediação e tradução qualificadas. As pessoas que acolhemos deparam-se com um sistema veloz, difícil de acompanhar. É como apanhar um comboio que se move a alta velocidade, desafiante até de apanhar para os próprios locais. Têm progressivamente de conseguir apanhar este comboio para aceder à plenitude dos seus direitos, e é impossível fazerem-no sozinhas. É tempo de, em vez de programarmos respostas de cima para baixo, pensarmos num caminho partilhado que possamos trilhar juntos através do diálogo. Como se dizia ontem neste fórum, temos que transformar as pessoas beneficiárias em verdadeiros companheiros de caminho. Na Miru, estamos a fazê-lo passo a passo. Através do diálogo e da proximidade, estamos a tecer relações pessoa a pessoa. Na nossa comunidade de famílias refugiadas e voluntários locais no norte do país, o caminho para um futuro comum com lugar para todos é o diálogo. Gostaria de realçar que para a Miru é uma responsabilidade e uma oportunidade sermos a primeira e até agora a única organização portuguesa que integra a Network for Dialogue. Através desta rede, conseguimos conhecer outros projetos e outras organizações europeias que, como nós, trabalham localmente na inclusão através do diálogo. O diálogo parece simples, mas desdobra-se numa multiplicidade de projetos e respostas diferentes em cada contexto. O contexto importa, não há uma resposta única. E por isso, conhecer e trabalhar com os membros da rede é uma permanente aprendizagem. Podermos dialogar com líderes políticos e líderes religiosos, fazendo presente a voz de quem trabalha localmente, pessoa a pessoa, é essencial neste processo complexo de incluir, envolver e empoderar. Como disse, é uma grande responsabilidade. Queremos trazer o nosso contributo positivo para a Network for Dialogue, enquanto plataforma europeia, contribuindo assim para a construção do futuro das discussões e ações políticas sobre migrações na Europa. Queremos que também vocês possam aprender connosco. Por isso, estamos aqui, sempre disponíveis para um diálogo profundo e significativo. Obrigada. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Isabel. Thank you very much to all contributors for your expertise that you have brought over the course of the 2 days on the topic which is of high relevance for European societies, how can we support participation of refugees and migrants in host societies. You helped us to get inspired and shed light on promising ways forward, how we can improve the current situation and learn from each other. We would love to know what your thoughts were on the event and so far, and how we can improve. Therefore, I would be grateful if you could access the evaluation form in the chat on the app now, and let us hear your feedback. You can also find hard copies of evaluation forms on your tables. Of particular importance was, of course, your contribution in the working sessions and the process in the 4 tracks. Your contributions will be included in shaping final versions of input papers. We are grateful to our 4 facilitators, Maya, Steven, Tanya, and Emina, who have done such an excellent job, and to our co-facilitators from the Network for Dialogue, Mabruka, Amanda, Atala, Rosica, Amjad, Neira, Emiko, Haisem. You have made sure to drive your groups forward. Thank you very much. We hope that the European Policy Dialogue Forum will continue to serve as a platform where we can all feel that challenges can be transformed into opportunities, where joint action can make change visible, and where partnerships between policymakers, religious leaders, faith and civil society organizations can be developed and strengthened. We strongly believe that the European Policy Dialogue Forum is and will continue to be a dialogical space for gathering diverse groups of participants and for developing practical policy recommendations. The big question for all of you might be, what is coming next? How can we go beyond this gathering and provide active contribution to migration policies across Europe? The proposals that have been presented by you coming out of the 4 tracks will now be further included into final versions of input papers, which will be published as policy briefs. We want to bring about these 4 input papers as policy briefs in early 2022, to initiate change and strengthen social dynamics and processes in Europe. We are aware that we hardly will allow for any impact if you are not going to engage with those briefs later on, share them with relevant stakeholders in your network, and allow them to get them read and discussed with policymakers. Thus, the dissemination will be vital for those who are going to join us in that journey. I will now call my colleague Johannes Langer for his final words. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alexandra. Finally, on my end, many thanks to everyone who is believing in this forum. We are particularly grateful to our partners, the European Council of Religious Leaders, Religions for Peace, Europe, as well as the kind support of the OSCE's Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights, ODIHR. But we are particularly grateful to Reverend Dr. Wipf and Dr. Manoka, who are here in the room with us today as well. I want to applaud and thank everyone from the KAICIID team as well for all the efforts that they have done to bring these first 2 days together, the 3rd European Policy Dialogue Forum on Refugees and Migrants. And you have walked the extra mile to make all of this possible. As you're all aware, there are many weeks and, as a matter of fact, months of work in order to bring these 2 days together. At the same time, we particularly want to thank also Metropolitan Emmanuel, who is a strong supporter of the refugee program in KAICIID. More than anything, though, our thanks go to you. We are convening this space, but it depends on you what you're making out of it. What we have heard from a lot of people, and hopefully like it is true for most or even all of you, that the last 2 days have allowed for dialogical conversations to learn more about the other and to engage with other stakeholders, with other human beings whom we otherwise may not be in the position to interact with. We are aware that, like with the COVID restrictions, not everything is necessarily easy, but we do hope that nonetheless it was possible to have more of learning that was taking place. It is not over yet, of course. This was the third European Policy Dialogue Forum on Refugees and Migrants. Today is awaiting us the third day of the European Policy Dialogue Forum 2021, and it is the high-level dialogue on social cohesion, and we're indeed very much looking forward to specifically focus on one of the aspects that was also discussed during the working groups, the specific aspect of countering hate speech in Europe. So we're looking forward to that, and for the last words, I give back to our MC, to Elena. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Johannes, Isabel, and Alexandra, for your last words that are concluding this session. Before we leave, though, we have several announcements, so please bear with us for a few seconds more. This room will be adjusted for the high-level dialogue, so please take all your belongings with you, including the notepads. Second announcement, everyone, before departing tomorrow, everyone who is going to depart tomorrow, please verify departure time at the hospitality desk so that you make sure that you have the correct timing. And finally, I would like to remind everyone that tonight we are going to have our official dinner that takes place at the Museo do Oriente at 7 p.m. Make sure to be ready in an hour, well, I would say even less than an hour, since we're getting a bit late, as the buses that will bring you are going to leave at 6:30 p.m. So I would really strongly encourage everyone to be in the lobby at the latest at 6:20 p.m. There will be a theater performance of 50 minutes related to our discussion topics, as well as delicious Portuguese food awaiting all of us there. We recommend business attire for that evening. So thank you very much, every one of you, for your participation and for having been with us. And see you very soon for our dinner tonight. Thank you once again.